Buffalo gets no respect. It's the second largest city in New York, a major state, but most people never think twice about it, or they completely forget about it altogether. I live in the downstate region of New York, and most people I know think of Buffalo as another planet. Many people can list all the coastal cities, famous beaches, European countries, or Caribbean islands that they've all flown to, but they've never even steered remotely close to Buffalo. I honestly thought it was a fictional place whenever I'd hear the name when I was younger. There's an NFL team and an NHL team that people outside of the area don't usually care about, and most people couldn't point to it on a map. But why? It's the second largest city in one of the nation's largest and most influential states. If it weren't for New York City itself, Buffalo would be as significant in its state as Detroit or Milwaukee. Yet, it simply fails to be a household name or get any respect. Or, people just spout out negative facts like the snow, or run-down parts, or saying it's in the middle of nowhere. I've now been there 5 times, and I have lots of opinions on this place, and I am rooting for this reputation to eventually change. But they have to earn it. So let's talk about what this place is really like, and how it can be improved. So, some background on Buffalo. It sits right at the eastern end of Lake Erie, right where the Niagara River begins flowing northward. It's right across the Peace Bridge from Fort Erie, Ontario, and therefore some people commute in from Canada. It's the second biggest city and metro on Lake Erie, behind Cleveland, Ohio. There are no mountains nearby, as it sits in the Erie, Ontario lowlands north of the Allegheny Plateau and well west of the Finger Lakes region. Driving there from New York City is a little weird, since there are no major highways directly linking them. You'd either have to drive towards Rochester and take the toll road I-90, or take US 20A from the Geneseo and Mount Morris area near Letchworth State Park. It's about 6 to 7 hours from New York City, though, for most people. It's an easier approach from the west, as I-90 comes in straight from Erie, Pennsylvania and Cleveland, Ohio, more or less following the lakeshore. Now, Buffalo is definitely in the super region known as the Rust Belt, and the city was clearly tailored to industry, of which a large portion is now defunct. That means, like many cities in the region, the name of the game is recovering from the downfall of prior industry. Now, before I talk about the problems, let's discuss the few criteria that would make any city like this appealing to visitors and potential residents. First, having geographic significance. I don't want to feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere. Fortunately, as we've already discussed, Buffalo's got it, being at the end of Lake Erie. Next, it's got to take advantage of the geography. So in this case, it needs a good waterfront. And the main parts of town need to in some way be related to that. And I say Buffalo's got that. There's an extensive waterfront, which we'll talk about more in a bit, and downtown starts up right near where the Buffalo River meets the lake. So it feels like everything's where it is for a reason and not arbitrarily placed, like in some other cities like, say, Atlanta, Georgia. Then, it needs to have walkable neighborhoods. It shouldn't all be based on car transit or office buildings that are dead quiet in the off hours. And Buffalo does have a few of these neighborhoods. The Allentown and Elmwood Village neighborhoods are great examples of mixed-use areas with residences and small commercial blocks and parklets all around. Is it enough for the whole city, though? Not sure. Then, it has to have enough interesting things around the city. I consider a city one-dimensional if downtown is the only thing worth visiting. And Buffalo does have a number of Easter eggs and interesting neighborhoods and college campuses and tourist attractions all around. So that's good. Finally, it has to have enough people to use up the infrastructure. Well, the west side of town is pretty filled in, but the rest, So with all this in mind, let's now talk about the problems. Starting right in downtown. It's pretty sad. Main Street is pretty much a perpetual ghost town. There are lots of beautiful buildings, monuments, and well-designed plazas and government buildings, but very few people care to be there. Many critics point to the failed Main Place Mall, which practically sits empty on an entire block of Main Street right in the center of town. Everyone will argue about the chicken or the egg as to which caused the other to fail. But the bottom line is, the commercial and walkable aspects of downtown absolutely do not live up to their potential. There is a subway that still runs along Main Street, including at grade in most of downtown. So it's good that there's enough demand for that. There's also a theater district a few blocks in, and while I'm sure it's active in some way, nothing's ever taken place while I was there. I know that's anecdotal, but the bottom line is, it's clearly not a full-time thing. Up next, let's talk about the population. It should come as no surprise that the population has steadily been decreasing over the past half century, from over 580,000 to now below 280,000. But the last census actually went up, which is great. People all over the New York City area and all these major cities around the country are all complaining about overpopulation and the impossible housing markets. But I'm sure the people of Buffalo find that ridiculous. This place needs more people. Now, as I said, the western side of the city seems to be plenty filled in with buildings, houses, and people. And as a result, there are nice, walkable, filled-in neighborhoods like Allentown and Elmwood Village. The main problem is the entire east side of town. You can see for yourself on the satellite map with all the vacant lots, or the pictures I took from the summer of 2023 right here. It's just a wasteland, and it takes up such a large chunk of the city. It's not just one neighborhood. Even the parks are pretty deserted as well. And there aren't a ton of options for shopping or anything, and it's not getting better. After all, it was the Tops Friendly Market on Jefferson Street that was the location of the shooting in 2022, and it's just making it all worse, beyond just the horrors of that event. It's about a 3-mile wide stretch of this lightly filled area, and about 9 or 10 square miles of it, that needs to be fixed somehow.
Okay, even this church from the previous shot is not even church anymore. It's owned by the University of Buffalo.
Now, in the southern portion of this zone, you have a lot of housing projects and townhouses, none of which use up the space well. It feels like you're in a separate world, and it surely doesn't result in any walkable neighborhoods. Now, on a similar topic, if you talk to anyone or read any sources talking about the improvements of the area, they're probably all going to reference Larkin Square. It's on an intersection with old industrial warehouses that they've attempted to convert into a hangout area with restaurants, food trucks, plazas, live music, and other desirable things for visitors. But I have one word to really describe it, and South Park fans, you'll know this one. Sodo Sopa. It's probably one of my favorite South Park episodes because it describes things like this so well. They take something old, try their best to make it look appealing, and get people to come, until they all get bored and abandon it again. This needs to be turned into a full neighborhood, not a little plaza or not something gimmicky. And it's almost always been deserted when I go, since no particular events were taking place then. The only time I saw it lively was, ironically, in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. It needs to be better than just an event venue and hangout zone. Get rid of all these parking lots, make housing, build stuff on these vacant lots, and make it appealing for longer-term businesses. It could lead to actual revitalization of the east side of town. I'd be less worried about the downsides of gentrification because there isn't much housing here as it is anyway. Now, let's talk about how Buffalo does with its geography. There's an extensive waterfront, which is great. What's not great is the parks themselves. When I revisited the large LaSalle Park in 2023, the whole park was in disrepair and dilapidated. How can this happen? This should be obvious. If you respect yourself as a city, you need to maintain your waterfront parks. Don't make it unappealing to everyone. Start with this, please. Next, just to the south of it is the harbor, with an observation tower and some nice waterfront real estate. But it's also not used up well. This entire breakwater, or peninsula, or whatever you want to call it, is completely covered with parking lots, and this entire side is covered with luxury housing that takes up more space than necessary. It completely disconnects the waterfront. So is there any way to connect this better? And then, at the southern part of the city's waterfront, there's a large swath of parkland along former industrial sites, which is great. What's not great? It's practically impossible to get to. You have to go 2 miles south to access it by foot or bike, or you still have to drive a mile south or take the seasonal ferry from Canal Side. I feel like there's a chance for a more convenient bridge at Michigan Avenue, but that's through an industrial zone, and even this bridge has been closed off for as long as I can remember. What Buffalo really has been working on is the waterfront of the mouth of the Buffalo River, known as Canal Side, which is actually nice. They've made it into a nice tourist zone with a park-like atmosphere and food trucks and such running from the southern end of downtown to the hockey arena, going underneath the Buffalo Skyway. Speaking of which, another controversial yet common issue is the roadways. Buffalo is actually really well designed with its park and parkway system by Frederick Law Olmsted, known for his Central Park design. And in the north central part of the city, you can see the nice grids at different angles with some slightly larger parkways with actual parks in the middle of them. These aren't like limited access highways that you're used to. I mean, you could see me biking here in this shot right now. It really adds to the nice neighborhood feel and makes the city feel continuous, but not endless. The controversial roads that I hear about more than anything are the Skajaquada Expressway and the Buffalo Skyway. The Skajaquada Expressway connects Route 33 to I-190, but many people complain that it's unnecessary, it cuts into neighborhoods, and it totally ruins Delaware Park, which I agree with that point. Delaware Park looks like it was a nice grand central park away from all the hustle and bustle, and now it has a highway running through it. I will say though, I do honestly enjoy driving into town on the Buffalo Skyway though. It truly is a grand entrance. But I understand the complaints though. But this flows directly into the next issue, which is common around the country, and especially upstate New York. The donut effect. These controversial highways are indicative of the reality that many people have moved out of the city and into the suburbs. And the problem with the Buffalo suburbs is that they're not interesting at all. We are in a flat plain, and the suburbs are all generally inland of the lake and Niagara River, so there's no interesting geography at all. Kenmore is one of the more well-to-do suburbs, but the main roads just have chain restaurants, and there's nothing interesting to see at all. In fact, other than the city of Tonawanda and North Tonawanda, there's nothing remotely interesting in the suburbs whatsoever, not even in the area where the Buffalo Bills play. It's all just messy sprawl with lots of traffic and traffic lights, with the occasional industrial zone or train yard sprinkled in at places. And of course, everyone also complains about the snow, but come on, you're in the northeastern United States, what do you expect? And besides, there's nothing we can do to fix that. But look at the bright side, at least it's not Syracuse. Alright, so now let's look at potential solutions to these problems. First, make the center of town worth visiting or being in. Get rid of the mall. Stop playing the blame game, just get rid of the mall. Fill it in with some commercial things or something that can be accessed from all sides. Give us an alternative to the government buildings and office buildings that can make this place appealing 7 days a week. Not a box store or parking garage, something that belongs in a city downtown. Same thing goes for Larkin Square to the east. Turn it into an area, not just a spot, and make it an area that people will go to 7 days a week. I think Canal Side is a little better in that regard, but how about we fill things in on this lawn here? Something low-rise or small shops that would potentially attract and retain people in the area. As for the rest of the waterfront, how about we maintain LaSalle Park? And let's find a better way to connect inner and outer harbor parks for pedestrians. In Cleveland, Ohio, they just recently created a pedestrian bridge in a similar situation. So Buffalo should explore options too. Help us take advantage of the excellent waterfront and interesting old industrial infrastructure. As for this area, man, wouldn't it be great if the city could somehow buy waterfront rights to build a more attractive waterfront path connecting everything, rather than the convoluted network of paths behind the properties? Or maybe at least make a straighter or grander path by the train tracks here. Now, I'm no expert at how to fix the population losses in the east side of town, or how to fill in all the vacant lots. But perhaps could you work east to west here, starting near downtown, filling in space more efficiently or even vertically, and make this entire area some semblance of walkable rather than drive-through territory? There are plenty of small businesses in the area, but they're all spread out. Can there be one nice dedicated road, or even a block, that can serve as a focal point in the area? As for the parkways, I see all the arguments for removing them. And we also see nearby cities like Rochester remove their downtown highways. But I wouldn't even bother rushing into changing that. We're not short on room for building more houses in the area, so while it would be nice not to need them someday, let's prioritize for now. It would also be nice if someday there could be demand for another subway line, say more towards the east from downtown. But yeah, we need the people first. And lastly, while there is a lot of local pride for Buffalo, we need to make this place a household name again. And perhaps that starts with you and me. If you're in the area, and especially if you live in New York State and haven't been to Buffalo yet, I mean, come on, it's your home state, just drive over and check out the city. You could even then venture off to Niagara Falls and Toronto, or go all the way around Lake Ontario. You can really explore all around your backyard in 2 different countries by just visiting a classic yet forgotten American city. Buffalo is so close to being a really nice city, and I'm confident it will be someday. And it's already way better than it used to be. And that's because the people care. And I hope in some sense, we all care about the places we live and venture to. Alright, and one final note, I know most of you won't care, but I did write a pretty intense musical soundtrack for this place that I also used in my other Buffalo and Niagara Falls videos. And that's because I find the city to be quite a climax for those of us exploring west from the New York City or New England areas. New York is an incredibly geographically diverse state, and it all seems to converge to its ending here in Buffalo. But I'll gladly take any criticism of the music, or the commentary, or of the city itself. And I'd love to hear your opinions on Buffalo, and what's good and what needs improvement. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.